How's it going, guys? I'm so excited to show you this build today for Sorcerer, my favorite class, because Mobalytics have actually updated their tier list and added a Burning Frost Sorcerer build, so I'm going to review it here for you guys, talk about the differences that I would choose in the build, trial run it out in a dungeon, and show the whole build off to you so you can get an idea of how it works and things like that. We've actually teamed up with Mobalytics so that the build will be linked down below, the written version of it, so you can check it out. All of the skills, the enchantments, the Paragon board, the items, the stat priority, all of that stuff will be down below, but we will go through every single skill. I'll talk about why they're picked, how I might change certain things, and we'll demo it towards the end as well. But the core concept of this build will revolve around ice shards, which of course is similar to the build that I made and put out the other day. However, this one does have some changes here. As you can see, we've got teleport in. We also have the Fire Inferno ultimate skill, as well as Flame Shield instead of an actual basic skill, which is a very interesting choice, and we'll go through all of that as we can. If you want to just yoink the build and run though, then you can see all of the skills here with the modifiers that are picked, but it is pretty reliant on certain effects and synergies when it comes to the passives. Some of them are massive damage increases, so you might want to join me as we go through the skill tree. So let's go through the skill tree and talk about all of the options, how everything works, and all of that good stuff. So to begin with, we're actually going with the Flame Bolt basic skill, which currently we don't even have slotted in. However, it is used later on for its enchantment effect, which we'll talk about later on, but it's very, very important. As you can see, the enchantment effect here is at the bottom of the tooltip there. It says that direct damage from skills applies up to an additional 849 burning damage over 8 seconds. So what that means over in our enchantment screen, as you can see here, we obviously have ice shards as well. We'll go over this again later. But it means that all of our skills, including ice shards, will apply burning to enemies. So that's why it's a burning frost build. And that will be incredibly important later on when it comes to maximizing our damage output. So remember, we have Firebolt, but we're currently not using it, but we are using it for its enchantment. Then we come down to the core skills, and of course we have Ice Shards, and this is maxed out as high as possible because this is our biggest damage dealing skill. It's our core spammable skill. You know it, you love it. If you've tried it out, it's absolutely fantastic. And once again, as we just mentioned, you can actually see in the enchantments, we're using the Ice Shards as the second enchantment, which basically means when anything's frozen, you get free Ice Shards that fly out towards them. It's super incredible. So you want to have that as high as possible because it means that all of your Ice Shards will deal more damage. We have Enhanced, and then we have Greater because it means that they have a 40% chance to ricochet on frozen enemies, and then barriers count all enemies as frozen. So basically, as long as you have a barrier up, it's always ricocheting between enemies, so it is both single target and AoE. But then we come down to our defensives, and we have quite a lot of skills here, as you can see. So to begin with, we have Flame Shield, which is a 2-second shield around you. It also gives you movement speed with Enhanced, and it also heals you for half of your missing life with Shimmering. This is another way to get a barrier. It's another way to burn things around you. It's a movement speed skill, and it also is a heal, so it does quite a lot altogether. However, for me personally for this build, because I'm reviewing the exact Mobalytics one, and I have tested this out myself a little bit, I would actually rather remove the Flame Shield and pump those 3 into Glass Cannon for that 18% times more damage. It's a multiplier. And I would actually run the Firebolt as a basic skill because sometimes, and this could be because I'm not high enough level and I don't have enough Paragon boards set up, but sometimes I do actually go with this build. And so you really want a basic skill to just sort of fill the gap in between to give you that little bit more mana, so you can do another Ice Shard and begin the combo all over again of refunding the mana and casting for free. We'll go and explain that all as we go through, because there's a bunch of passives down here that are to do with refunding mana and stuff like that. So we also have Teleport. It's so hard to make a build and not include Teleport because it's so useful for its utility. You may have seen my build the other day where we don't use it, and you do miss it when you don't have it. But it's a tough choice because there are other skills you can include that synergize with the rest of the build. However, Teleport is included in this one for its mobility, but also because you can enhance it for the cooldown reduction per enemy hit, but also the Shimmering that gives you a 30% damage reduction for 3 seconds. So every time you teleport, you are pretty heavily damage reduction for 3 seconds. You have a pretty high amount of damage reduction. It's a very good passive. They actually nerfed this in the recent patch. It used to be for 5 seconds, now it's only for 3, but it's still good, and 30% reduced damage is very good because we're very, very squishy as a sorcerer, of course. We've just talked about the Glass Cannon by removing Flame Shield, but you know, the actual build does use Flame Shield, so you can take it or leave it. I'll just tweak things as we go to my preference. We have 1 point in the Elemental Attunement passive that makes our crit strikes basically refund a defensive skill cooldown. Now, all of these are defensive, so basically on a lucky hit, we have a 5% chance to instantly refresh a cooldown. It's pretty big. I would like more points into this. I haven't done all of my renown, so you could probably max this out if you have done all of your renown and got those bonus skill points. We of course have Ice Armor, and we have Enhanced for the mana regeneration, and Shimmering so that there's a chance to basically freeze enemies when they hit you. We want to be freezing things as much as possible because we have that enchantment with Ice Shards that then sends out Ice Shards towards them for free. So this is a very good upgrade line. You don't need any more points than 1 in Ice Armor, and just increases the barrier amount, but we're fine. We can generate a lot of barriers as it is. It's very good for the mana regeneration though. And then of course Frost Nova, a staple skill. Since basically doing a bit of research, it seems that pretty much everyone kind of knows that Frost Nova is where it's at when it comes to Sorcerer builds. It's a massive freeze, and it applies invulnerability. As you can see, it also generates mana per enemy hit with this Shimmering upgrade. So Frost Nova, just really good. Like you can't not have this in your build, because Vulnerable and Frozen stacks with so many effects and makes us just deal tons and tons and tons of damage. What I will say is they only put 1 point into this. I have +2 from an item, but I would probably want to max this out because each point in this reduces the cooldown by a little over 1 second. So I would max this out to reduce the cooldown, but in the build they only have 1 point in it, so that's what we're going to be running with. Then we come down to the Conjuration skills, and we're not taking any of them, but we do have a bunch of passives here. So we have Precision Magic, which will give us bonus lucky hit chance, so that will help with proccing Elemental Attunement. It will also help with proccing down here Frigid Breeze that we'll get to soon. But we do have 1 point in a Line of the Elements, which allows us to get 3 points into Protection. This basically means whenever we use a cooldown, such as one of our abilities, so if I do Teleport, we'll gain damage reduction from Teleport, but thanks to this, we'll also get a barrier for a couple seconds, as you can see here, which applies to a lot of legendary effects that we have in our gear to increase our damage while we have a barrier up, increase our lucky hit chance while we have a barrier up, all that kind of stuff. So that's a very good one to have. And they also, I think they have more points in this, but I don't have, obviously, all of the skill points. But this means every time you spend 100 mana, you gain damage reduction, 5, 10, 15%. So if you have the points in it, you can max that out, and you get more damage reduction as you spam Ice Shards, which also stacks, of course, with our Teleport. So you become even more tanky. You combine that with the barriers, but basically super tanky and super high damage output. But next we go down to the Mastery skills. And as you can see, there's some interesting choices. We're spec both into the Frost and into the Pyromancer skills for the passives, and for good reason. In the Frost one, we gain 5% increased duration to our barriers, but this allows us to have access to Snap Freeze, so that all of our Frost skills, that basically means our Ice Shards as we're spamming them and they ricochet between enemies, has a lucky hit chance of 9% to instantly freeze things, and when they're frozen, the enchantment kicks in, which sends out Ice Shards to them and damages them for free. Remember, we have increased lucky hit chance with Precision Magic over here, so this is really nice to have. It just means we're freezing things all the time. And we also put 1 point in Inner Flame. Basically, it adds a little bit of Pyromancy skill damage, but we're not using it for that. We're really using it so we can get to Devouring Blade, which, guys, this build is all about Devouring Blade as a passive. This passive is insane. It says, you deal 30% times increased critical strike damage against burning enemies. If they're immobilized, it's increased to 75%. This is a multiplier, not a flat bonus to your critical strike damage. It doesn't mean you get 30% more critical strike damage. It means it times your overall critical strike damage by 30%, to my understanding. If we look at another skill, I'll just have a quick look around for one. I'm sure that we can find one. So you can see here on this fireball, destructive fireball, it says critical damage is increased by 10% plus. So that means plus 10%, whereas this one is times 10%, times 30% or 75. So it's even bigger a bonus when it comes to these times effects. It's a bigger bonus, it's a multiplier. So this is actually a really incredible passive to have. But we have to be hitting burning enemies, right? Well, remember, we have this Frostbolt enchantment that makes all of our skills make things burn, including our Ice Shards. So everything we hit is always burning. So we always have a 30% modifier on our critical strike damage, and if they're immobilized, it's 75%, which is absolutely massive. Then we come over to our ultimates, and much like my build, we're maxing out every skill here. increased damage to elites with frost skills, increased cold damage to vulnerable enemies, increased damage to chilled and frozen enemies, and then the lucky hit chance on vulnerable enemies to basically generate mana. This allows us to spam ice shards a lot more because it's refunding mana with lucky hit, which again we have increased lucky hit here and we can roll it on our gear substats. So these are all pretty much looking good. Interestingly though, they do have Inferno picked with its first upgrade, so it pulls in enemies. So instead of having something like Deep Freeze, which is like a panic button, makes us invulnerable and freezes everything around us, which does synergize with the build because it's freezing things, and it's really just a nice one to have. I love Deep Freeze personally, but this isn't my build, guys. This is the S tier Mobalytics build, and they've gone with Inferno. And what I will say is I actually love the visuals of Inferno. Obviously the giant fire snake just looks awesome. But remember, it's pulling enemies in and also applying that burn to them. So we're not only triggering the passive as we do with our ice shards because of the enchantment, but burning things is just good. But it's also grouping enemies in, pulling them in. Then we can Frost Nova and just burst them down super, super quick. So I would, as a personal preference, I would go with Deep Freeze instead. But we're going to run with Inferno because it's really cool and I understand the synergy, and it is, of course, part of the build. And then for the final key passive, instead of having Avalanche like in my build, they've gone with Shatter, which means once a freeze expires, enemies explode for 25% of the damage you dealt to them while they were frozen. This is kind of like just more damage to frozen enemies effectively, so this is definitely really good. I'm a big fan of Avalanche so that we never, absolutely never run out of mana, and it increases the damage obviously with our ice shards. So personally, I would swap out Inferno and put Deep Freeze on. I would swap out Shatter and put Avalanche on. But it might be that you pick these skills because they're more damage-focused skills, so maybe when you hit level 80 and 90 and you have more Paragon board filled out, these ones might actually be the better ones to pick in terms of your damage output, and you don't need that extra refunding mana, and you don't need that extra survivability. You're just focused on damage at those super high levels. I think that could be the case. We'll quickly go over the enchantments. You guys have already seen it as we've gone through. Of course, Ice Shards and Frost Firebolt. Ice Shards so that we send them out for free to frozen enemies, and this so that we burn them so that we get that extra damage multiplier to our critical strike damage. So that was quite a lot to go over there, right? But let's go over my gear real quick. They do, of course, have this in the written build as well. You can see the recommended gear. I don't have all of the gear pieces, but I did get one unique since my last Sorcerer build video, which I was incredibly happy to get. You can see I finally got the Ice Heart pants. This unique is so incredible. Enemies that die while frozen have a chance, and it rolled 20% maximum. It rolled as good as it could on the effect to unleash another Frost Nova. So what this effectively means, and if you can get this, any Frost build you make is going to be just so much better. When a frozen enemy dies, which they die really quick because we're going to be putting out so much damage and we are freezing them with Frost Nova, it can make it like a chain reaction, and just Frost Novas pop out everywhere on that 20% chance. So it's chance-based, but it does, you know, it's 1 in 5. It happens quite a lot. In a group of enemies, 1 in 5 is pretty easy to proc, right? But let's go through each of my armor pieces, because some of them might apply, some of them might not apply to the build. So for my head, you can see when I hit a crowd-controlled enemy, there's a chance to apply that crowd control effect to spread to another enemy. So basically, if we hit a frozen enemy, there's a chance it will freeze another nearby enemy, and then when those enemies die, they have a chance to chain react, and we're also sending out ice shards to frozen enemies with our ice shards enchantment, so that's a nice one to have. We also have, this is an amazing one, guys. Frost Nova gains an additional charge, but the cooldown is reduced by 36%, so it basically gives us 2 Frost Novas that we can bank, so it's always, you know, you use one, the other one's coming back. It's just absolutely, this is really, really good. If you don't have this one, I would, it works without it, but I would suggest you try your best to farm this one. So, you know, if you're in Hell Tides, go for those chests, go for the chests that give you a chest piece. And then we go down to the gloves. This one, of course, doesn't actually apply to this build because we're not using Deep Freeze, but that's just the best armor piece I have for this slot. Of course, the Ice Heart pants that we already talked about. For my legs, this is another important one. We gain 20% lucky hit chance while we have a barrier up. As we've just discussed, there's a lot of lucky hit chance stuff that sort of mixes into this build, so that's going to be a very good one to have as well. For my weapon, you can see I'm dealing 38% increased damage to vulnerable enemies while I have a barrier up. So again, all of our skills gives us barriers. We're making them vulnerable with Frost Novas, so this is just straight up more damage. When it comes to substats, things like vulnerable damage, you can see I have it there. Damage to frozen enemies is going to be very, very good. Intelligence as our main core stat. Also, anything that reduces mana or gives ranks to stuff like Frost Nova or Ice Shards is going to be very good. You can also see on our gloves, critical strike chance is going to be very, very good. You can see we've got the ranks for Ice Shards here on our gloves. On my chest piece, I've got flat damage and cold damage. That's going to be good. Armor and fire resistance. I've just got unlucky on the substats there, but you want to pick the best things that you have. Over to the accessories though, you can see here that I'm dealing 51% more damage to immobilized, stunned, or frozen enemies. So again, this is another really good one to have for this build because it's all about freezing things and then we deal more damage to them. You can also see on my rings, I have Ice Shards pierce 4 times and deal a little bit less damage per subsequent enemy hit. But this basically upgrades our Ice Shards so that it goes through enemies and ricochets. So it's really, really good as well. So you kind of want that one also. And then we have the Mother's Embrace unique ring that you get from the end of the story. This just means if we hit 5 or more enemies with our core skill, which we pretty much always do when they're grouped up because it's ricocheting between them, it gives us a bit of our resource back. It helps us spam things. So you can see that's all of the gear pieces. There's a lot of synergies. They're not all perfect. I don't have all the best substats. I even have this one effect that is completely invalid for this build, but the build still works really good. I can see why it is an S tier build, even if there is a few things that I, in my personal preference, would change for that actual build. But let's actually go through and do a live dungeon run with the build so you can see it for yourself. Obviously, I've done the Firebolt change because that's my preference, but the rest of the build is largely the same and plays basically in the same way. So it's really interesting to try out like an alternate version of a build that I've already been running with, except I think they are actually onto something with the passive down here, the Devouring Blaze. Having that modifier to our crit strike damage is pretty insane, so I might even end up tweaking my version of the build to include the Firebolt enchantment with that passive. It does look like a cool thing, and I love having my teleport back. And I really like using Inferno, if I'm honest. It's just, I think Deep Freeze is more synergetic with a build like this, but it'll be really fun to use it. So, we round them up, we freeze them, and we knock them down. It's a fun playstyle, you know, it's the same sort of Ice Shards playstyle that you're probably used to. But it is still a fun playstyle. I didn't even see that barrel there blew up. What I will say is, while trying this build up, because the skill points aren't exactly the same, you don't have the Ice Blades that's lowering the cooldowns, you don't have as many points in passives like this one, which refunds our defensives, and because we now have teleports in, when it refunds a defensive, it could go on the teleport. It means that we aren't getting our Frost Nova back as often as I do in my version of the build, so there is some instances where we're all on cooldown and we just kind of have to wait, and that's something that I don't enjoy for the build personally, but it could be a Paragon board thing where I just need to get higher levels in the Paragon board. So we freeze them, we knock them down. You see it's just absolutely blasting everything. This is World Tier 3, as you can see below the map, so you know that these mobs will hurt normally. The World Tier 3 is level 50 to 70, and I'm of course level 57, so we're pretty much where we want to be in World Tier 3. We have unlocked World Tier 4, maybe we'll start testing them out on World Tier 4 in the future builds, but considering I don't have all the perfect gear for this kind of a build... Ooh, do you see the chain reaction of Frost Novas? It's so sick when it pops up like that. Alright, I just gotta focus a sec, guys. The elite spawned and I wasn't exactly ready for it. So you can see here, we're in this situation where we're waiting for our Frost Nova cooldown, but as soon as it's up, we can then burst again. So the only thing I'm spotting when I thought to review this S tier build is sometimes we are in that situation where everything's on cooldown and we have to wait, and that's when things can get a little bit dangerous. Let's see if we can find some more elites or things to sort of round up here. So here we go, we'll round them up. We'll do our teleport for that damage reduction. We'll freeze everything. Chain reaction pops off. There we go, we got our Frost Nova back a second time. Brilliant. You can see we just got but everything died, so it doesn't really matter if you're out of mana if everything has already been defeated. Largely playing the same. Absolutely loving the fact that we still have teleport in the build. That is a big deal for me. I absolutely love having teleport in, but I am missing the bonus cooldown reduction that comes with the Ice Blades. Let's just keep going through and see how we do against the other stronger elites and stuff throughout the map. What have we got here? We got Blast Wave. I'm not going to pick that up just so that you guys can still see me demoing the build, because otherwise we'll be killing things with Blast Wave. So it looks like there's one more Fallen Idol to defeat, probably over here somewhere on the map. We'll go take that, then we'll go and advance through the rest of the dungeon. But it is super interesting. That Devouring Blaze passive is definitely one that I overlooked, especially... Oh, rounding them up with the Inferno is so sick. I can see why you use Inferno. It literally pulls them all together so that they all get frozen and they all start... Oh, you see that, again, it's happening where I'm waiting on my cooldowns. So we just gotta wait for Frost Nova and we can really burst him. As soon as that Frost Nova's up, he's instantly dead. But we are reliant on that Frost Nova, at least from my testing here, as you guys are probably seeing yourself. Build that elite there. Ooh, Veiled Crystals. You can't ever have enough of those. So yeah, the main thing that my takeaway from this build is that there's definitely good synergy with pulling enemies in with the Inferno and its enhancement, but the main thing that I'm seeing is definitely this Devouring Blaze multiplier on our crit damage is pretty massive, if I'm honest. So yeah, having that Firebolt enchantment so that our Ice Shards can burn and then we can make advantage of that passive is definitely like a cool and important thing. Just move this and we'll go and head on through. You see, everything still dies super quick. Like, the damage output is still very impressive. It's still survivable because every cast is giving us a barrier. We still have, like, that chance to refund the... You know, we're still... As long as they're frozen and we have a barrier up, it's not a problem when it comes to mana. It's if they aren't vulnerable and frozen, then mana becomes a problem. So you can see even on that, he didn't get vulnerable, but he did get frozen, so we were okay on our mana. Wow. So you could see there we had that. What happened there is our lucky hit chance to freeze popped, and then our unique to make a Frost Nova appear when a frozen enemy dies popped. So just by doing Ice Shards, sometimes you can just get a massive AoE wave clear. We round him up and we knock him down. See, this is I don't want to use my cooldown when they're like super low like that. So sometimes I will just leave. I'll basically just leave an elite at like low health and whittle it down with the basic skill, because I don't want to waste my cooldown since, you know, we're about to run into a whole big wave of mobs. There we go. Looks like there's not that many more things to defeat. Is this going to be a trick chest? Oh, it's a legit one. Not bad. I just love pressing buttons and seeing things die. Ooh, the chain reaction sort of kicked off there. Very nice. All things in there. Let's put some damage out. Our Frost Nova's up. Bursting. Brilliant. Ooh, a Sacred. A few more enemies down here. We are still waiting on our Frost Nova. So you guys can kind of see that the build definitely works. It's very similar to other Ice Shard builds, but it has the extra defensives of the teleport. However, you can see the sort of, ooh, everything popped off. See, maybe I just don't have enough lucky hit chance. Because everything is free, like, just then, our lucky hit chance all popped off, everything starts freezing, our unique kicks in to start doing Frost Novas on them, so the unique pants here that we were talking about before. So it could just be that you need a really high lucky hit chance to make this work. If we actually look at mine, I think I have like 40% lucky hit chance or something like that. 20%, but when we have a barrier alert, oh, it's not updating, but we have the effect here that adds another 20. So we have 19.3 and then we have an extra 20% there. So we actually have about 40% on this. Maybe we need 60 to 80% so that the passive here that you can see, the snap freeze, applies more often, and then that starts freezing things for free. Because right now, the only problem I see with this is that things are, you know, we're waiting on our Frost Nova to actually burst, but it could be because you need more lucky hit chance. That's basically what it could be in my experience. So we've cleared out the dungeon. You guys have seen the build. This is, of course, the S-tier Sorcerer Burning Frost one on Mobalytics. The written version is down below if you want to check it out and try it out for yourself. But that's my review of the build. I've tried it out. I've done quite a few dungeon runs with it. I've obviously seen some things that I would tweak for myself, like we've talked about before. I really do love Deep Freeze, so I don't know if I would keep Inferno, but Inferno is really cool, as you can see here. But that's the build, guys. Tell me what you think down below. Are you going to try this out? Have you made a similar build? What small tweaks to the build are you going to make that will make it even better? Did you know about the Devouring Blaze passive that's a multiplier to your critical damage? Because this is kind of game-changing for me, if I'm honest, so definitely keep note of that. Obviously, you kind of need something that burns them, so the Firebolt enchantment that works on Ice Shards is massive, but tell me what you think down below. Hit that like button if we have helped you out here and you enjoy all our Diablo content. We have guides, farms, and other builds for other classes coming soon or already on the channel for you. And the 2 videos on screen now, we think you'll really enjoy if you did enjoy this one. You don't have to watch them if you don't want to, but if you did like this video, you're probably going to like these ones too. So make sure to tell us what you think after watching in the comments down below.